don't fully know exactly the details of it, so we'll have some points. A little bit about migration after the partition. South Asian influences on the UK that kind of came with the migration. After all of that, the intergenerational trauma that these generations of people that were migrating from the subcontinent and the impact of that really. And then that kind of leads us into South Asian mental health. And again, it is going to be brief, but it's just some pointers to kind of just bring to the forefront really. So South Asia, geographic area has the following countries that it encompasses. So that's Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, and the Maldives. That map there is a little bit of a anomaly on there. So Myanmar is on there, but that belongs to Southeast Asia. And today we're going to focus on India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh because they make up the majority of the subcontinent. So let's kind of move to a little bit of history, really. I feel like it's a history lesson, but just a few bullet points. So the East India Company, which a lot of people have heard about, and obviously the British Raj. So the East India Company was initially created in the 1600s, and it was to serve as a trading body for English merchants, especially to participate in the East Indian spice trade. I think it later added things like cotton, opium, silk, indigo to its good. But interestingly, it also participated in the slave trade. And I know from Black History Month last year, we talked a lot about that. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it was definitely very much involved in that within the Indian subcontinent too. So at the start of the 19th century, the Indian subcontinent was ruled by the East India Company, which had gradually taken over territory as the former Mughal Empire was diminished. under the direct rule of the crown. So then that leads us to colonial rule, and the British Raj ruled almost all of what is present-day India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And what it did, it governed through three particular platforms. So they had imperial rule in London by a Secretary of State. They had the central government in Calcutta, and they had provincial rulers in districts of the subcontinent. In London, the cabinet formed a Council of India, which had made up of people who had spent no less than 10 years in the country, really. And basically, they just consulted the Secretary of State on many decisions of the governance. But it's really interesting because actually, bearing in mind, British rule started in 1858. So the first people that went across was in 1917. So that, I think that was Edwin Montagu, who was a Secretary of State at the time, who travelled to India for the first time. They had no real experience or knowledge of India, but they were still, the plan was to kind of rule it. So during the period of British rule, the UK invested huge capital expenditure in infrastructure, such as railways, mines, developed a legal and educational system, which is still there. You can see the influences of the empire very much in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. But it also drained India of its revenue, and that was to pay for the empire's army. They destabilized cropping patterns because they were doing a lot of commercialized farming at the point, and they didn't reinvest that revenue from capital investments into the country, which meant that a lot of people were left poorer than they were before. And you kind of can see that now when people talk about India as a third world country or Pakistan as a third world country, a lot of their resources had been pilfered and kind of taken to kind of fund the empire. So then that leads us on to the rise of nationalism and the beginning of the end, really. So the Indian National Congress was set up in 1885. It can be seen by many historians as the beginning of a new movement that led to the end of the British Raj, really. And I think as many as 15 million members kind of joined at the start of the 20th century, because they really wanted to kind of get India independent from Britain. And it came about following a rise in the middle classes in India, who were becoming increasingly discontent with the way the country was being ruled. And basically, when Britain took India to war without any consultation in 1939, the Congress opposed it because so many of their men, their soldiers, were dying. There was a large nationalist protest ensued. And basically, there's a huge movement that started in 1942, the Quit India movement, which was a mass movement against British rule. And then it was in the 1940s that the British Raj started unraveling. And the reasons for wanting independence were obviously lots of things around long-term and short-term factors. But there was this really big tide of nationalism. And I think the fact that people were kind of being drawn into going to war when they had absolutely nothing to do with the war, weren't really interested in it. It was kind of becoming increasingly a challenge for the British Empire to run politically, economically. They were really struggling. It wasn't cost effective to basically be ruling another country and as big as India at the time. That leads us on to independence. From the end of the First World War onwards, we know about Gandhi. He became a prominent pro-independence figure. He was leading millions of people in his quest for a peaceful solution to get the independence from the British rule. During the Second World War, about 2.5 million Indian troops fought alongside the British ones, as I mentioned earlier, and that was basically, it was kind of not acknowledged at the time. It was just like, you are a resource and we will use you, basically. Following the end of the war, Britain could no longer rule that country because they'd kind of taken all these soldiers there, and it cost a lot of money, basically. It kind of came down to that. I've just put important to note from the late 1930s, it was also becoming inevitable that independence was needed, wanted, but it could only be achieved if it was accompanied by a partition. And basically, it was because there was separatist movements that were also going on between Muslims and Hindus. It was becoming a religion war, basically. The Muslims want a separate state, the Hindus wanted a separate state. Not everybody, but there was huge chunks of discord, basically, that was found. And they decided that the partition would take place along the subcontinent's northwestern and northeastern boundaries, which would create two sovereign nations of India and Pakistan. And the people, there's a lot of history around that as well, but I don't want to go into that too much because we don't have the time. So again, it's another point that I'm just making, is the actual timing of independence owed a great deal to World War II and the demands it was putting on the British government and the people, and also obviously what was happening in India, because they were struggling themselves in terms of trying to get, the partition that they also wanted. And interestingly, just kind of moving on, I know Lord Louis Mountbatten, a prominent figure in history, he was India's last viceroy in March 1947. There's a film, actually, if you ever want to watch it, it's on Sky, I think, but available, which was about him. He brought an agenda to transfer power as quickly as efficiently as possible, and the resulting negotiations saw the deadline for the British withdrawal brought forward from June 1948 to August 1947. Now, if you kind of look in history, historians really criticise the haste as a major contributory factor in the chaos that came with the partition as well, because mass migration occurred across the new boundaries that were kind of outlined, and there was an estimated loss of millions of lives, and there was bloodbaths between Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs. It didn't really matter. It was very chaotic, and I think that they did it too quickly. It wasn't really thought out well, and it's interesting because when partition was declared, the countries would become independent from one another basically at the stroke of midnight immediately. So millions of people had to rush and decide which side of the border they want to go on, because they feared that they would be discriminated against because of their religion. I think the irony is that the creation of Pakistan as a land for Muslims nevertheless kind of left a lot of Muslims in India, and even now in independent India, it has the largest minority of Muslims within it, even though it's a non-Muslim state. So it didn't really work as well they had planned. But also another point is when they drew up these maps to kind of say, right, we're going to draw these maps and lines down everywhere to kind of do the partition. It was done by somebody. They're called the Radcliffe lines, named after the person that kind of developed them. But apparently he'd been using out-of-date maps to draw these lines. So they weren't really done in the best way. And basically you were just cutting through villages and homes and where people lived and cutting off communities across. And it just really wasn't done in the best way with the best people at the helm, really. And nobody can kind of, you can see this in the disputed region of Kashmir, which is actually the line kind of draws through an India and Pakistan. The 3 wars that have been fought since, a lot of that is owned to that kind of flashpoint, which is Jammu and Kashmir. So Pakistan celebrates its independence on the August 14th, and India celebrates on August 15th, which is why one of the reasons why the Heritage Month is held in August. Okay, so that was a little bit of history. I feel like we've just captured a few of the main points. There's a lot more to it, but due to time, we'll just kind of move on from that. So let's move on to partition. So I've got this picture here that's got the Radcliffe partition lines that were just basically drawn from really old maps. Okay. So the partition triggered a lot of riots, mass casualties, and it was a colossal wave of migration, one of the biggest ever seen in any lifetime, really. Millions of people moved to what they hoped would be safer territory. Muslims headed towards Pakistan and the Hindus and Sikhs in the direction of India. Many stayed put and stayed where they were as well. As many as about 14 to 16 million. I know there was a little bit of they kind of looked at these figures, but I think they've kind of, I think unanimously 14 to 16 million seems to be an estimate. People that have eventually been displaced. People travelled on foot, carts, by trains. As you can see, some of the pictures they were just overcrowded. There was a lot of violence on these trains as well. There's a lot of stories behind those as well. The death toll post-partition is estimated to be 2 million, but I think that's a very conservative figure because I don't think anybody's recording every single death toll. But given that it was a huge population and everything that was happening, I think that's being really, really conservative. Many were brutally killed by members of other communities and sometimes their own families. There's a lot of stories and histories about women, especially women and young girls. Their family would suffocate them, or they would drown them in the wells because women were seen as or targeted as symbols of community honor. So it felt like if you were raping or dismembering these women, it was basically you were dishonoring the community that they belonged to. So what families were doing is, because they didn't want that, they would kill their young girls and kill the women. And the ones that did survive, they were basically raped, abducted, they were converted, they had to forced to convert and forced to marry men, and they said up to 100,000, but again I think these figures are really conservative, to be honest. But there's a lot that people have seen, and there are stories that if you hear, certainly within my community, within family members that have talked about these, is just young children witnessing what happened to their mothers before they migrated or moved, and they went to different countries, the things they had witnessed and the things they didn't want to share with anybody, but they kind of came back to kind of haunt them really throughout their life. So we need to mention a little bit about Bangladesh, but again, I think if we had more time, it warrants its own kind of presentation, really, because after the partition of British India in 1947, Bangladesh was integrated into Pakistan. It was known as East Bengal until 1955, and thereafter as East Pakistan. It's interesting because on the one hand, you've got Pakistan on one side, then you've got massive India in the middle, and then you've got Bangladesh, which is at the other side. Yet these two countries at either side are meant to be as one, but there's a huge gap between them. There's a huge distance between them, and I think there was a lot of difficulties between the two wings. They grew strained over the lack of official recognition for the Bengali language, the democracy. There was about the regional autonomy, and there was a lot of ethnic discrimination as well, and I think these grievances led to a lot of political upheaval really in East Bengal, and ultimately they just wanted full independence. They just wanted to be on their own, basically. So there was in 1971 there was a massive operation that kind of went across, and basically in Pakistan they were targeting intellectuals, political activists and other minorities, and because of these uprisings that were happening, a lot of people died. Again, I think these figures of about 3 million dying and 8 to 10 million becoming refugees in India is conservative. And I know it feels like I'm saying this word million like it's just throwing it about, but I don't think we'll ever be able to fully fathom those numbers because it's a huge area. There's a lot of people. It's a very overpopulated area. But those numbers are so significant, I think. You know, saying 3 million people died in India, yeah, that kind of happened. But actually, if we look, if that was anywhere else, we're like, wow, 3 million people. You know, you can't even get your head around those numbers. So again, many Bengali policemen, soldiers, they formed a guerrilla force with India and the Soviet Union, and they basically just went to. There was a massive kind of war in 1971, and basically Pakistan was defeated at that point, and Bangladesh was created, and they had the independent state of Bangladesh. So now we have 3 countries, all separate from one another, which then kind of leads us on to thinking about what happens post-partition, post-colonialism, is migration. And I think Salome has a poll because there's a question we want to ask you.
Let me put a little poll so you can have a little drink of water if you want. And let's see what people know about this one. Oh, we're not having technical difficulties. Thank God, touch wood. So what are some of the reasons why people migrate from their homeland? And you can choose more than one. Can you? No, it's not letting me choose more than one option. So there's the technical difficulty. So we've only had 5 people respond. 7? Yeah, everyone's saying for a better chance of employment and better life, to be close to family as well. Yep. Thank you, everyone. So did you see the results come up as well? Yes. Okay. So thanks. Back to you, Aisha.
Can everybody see that? Sorry.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so why do people migrate from their homelands? And I think there's lots of reasons for this, and I think we have to be a little bit. We need to kind of understand what's happening in countries. So one of the things is political stability. I mean, we can see that with what's happening in Afghanistan right now, you know, with everything that's happening there. People are migrating for a safer, better life for themselves, for their children. You know, good climate is always one. You know, lower risk of natural hazards. We know with all the global warming that's happening, there's flooding, there's fires, there's all sorts. People migrate for those reasons. Higher employment and kind of seeking a better life is usually the #1 reason for why people kind of migrate. And being closer to family and friends is kind of up there. But the reason family and friends might have gone in the first place is for higher employment and a better life anyway. So it kind of fits in that. Okay, so South Asian migrants to the UK after 1947, they came with from different countries to escape civil war, and I think I've included that because there was some at in Bangladesh, but also in Sri Lanka was happening at the same time, to seek better economic opportunities, join family members already settled here, and in spite of facing discrimination in Britain, these migrants settled in the UK through their struggles for workers' rights, civil rights. They've actually contributed quite a lot to the political, economic and social life of the UK. And you can kind of see that in, you know, the multicultural hot pot that we've got within Britain now. Britain's labour shortages shaped the post-war migration patterns from the subcontinent. It was primarily men from middle-ranking, poorer families in the Punjab, farmers especially, particularly those who had been previously employed in the colonial army or the police force and their relatives, who took up the opportunity to come here. These Punjabi migrants found work in manufacturing, textiles and the service sectors. a lot of people, a lot of Punjabi men, significant number, worked at Heathrow Airport in West London. And you can see, if anyone's seen the Heathrow documentary, there's like a generation of one family of Sikh men. So the grandfather, the father, and the son now all work within Heathrow Airport as logistics controllers. Really interesting. And after the Commonwealth Immigrants Act was passed in 1962, that restricted the free movement of workers from the Commonwealth. So what happened was that most workers from South Asia decided that they're going to settle in the UK, and eventually they were joined by their families because they knew that they won't be able to come and go as they kind of wanted. And a large majority of Pakistani migrants in the UK were sailors. Actually, they found work on the engine room stokers on British ships, sailing out of Bombay to Karachi, and they settled in the UK in the 19th and early 20th centuries. If you have a look, there's a lot of textile industries, the mill, the cottons, the factories in Lancashire, Yorkshire, Manchester. There were engineering factories, West Midlands and Birmingham, and light industrial estates that were coming up in Luton and Slough. So all these kind of cities and towns I'm mentioning, if you see, they are very multicultural, and you can kind of see that. I mean, you only have to go to Manchester's Curry Mile and Rusholme to kind of see the effects of that. In Lancashire, you see, Birmingham, you've got Alum Rock and all these places, and that is where people migrated to. I think it's kind of just important to kind of say that there's a long history of that, and it kind of comes from that Britain needed people to kind of come after the war, because they were kind of struggling with labour within factories especially, and trying to rebuild Britain again. So it's not like the Windrush, we talked about that within Black History Month. There wasn't like a call out. There was always an opportunity. If you want to come, we would really like you to kind of come and help out in our factories, kind of thing, for manual labour. So it was very similar, but it was kind of pitched in a different way, if you will. And a lot of people took that opportunity, my family included, or my ancestors included. Okay, so going through migration, with migration, it brings with us some influences, South Asian influences. Now, I might be here for a long time if I talked about all the influences, so I've just picked some of my favourite ones. So I apologise if they're not everybody else's favourite, but I started with my first topic of choice, which is food. Okay, so before the 1800s, Indian food was a mystery, I think. 18th century England was, I'm quoting this, was an era of pies, boiled and roasted meats and puddings. And that's not me saying that, that was actually quoted in a book once. And I think the British occupation of the Indian subcontinent between 1858 and 1947, it saw a lot of people eating all these meals, and they wanted to come back and replicate these meals in India. And I think Queen Victoria herself had Indian staff who would cook her some of these dishes every day. And then I think most people were like, well, if it's good enough for the Queen, it's good enough for me, and I want to try it. And I think the British palate probably started to change, and more so with migration, with more people that were coming, everyone wanted to try these new colourful foods that were popping up, these little cafes that started, and then these big restaurants that kind of came, and you think that they started off in their original native form, but actually over time they were adapted to suit British tastes. So things such as chicken tikka masala, you've got balti dishes, you've got vindaloo, you've got kedgeree, mulgatoni soup, coronation chicken. They all took inspiration from the food that was brought from India to Britain, really. So these are just some of these lovely foods, are some of my favorite ones that I can cook. Okay, so moving on to the spice trail. So again, another influence on the UK. So black pepper, I can't not mention black pepper because it's native to Southern Asia. It's a well-loved seasoning we all like. And basically, if we kind of look back, it dates to being used in as back as 2000 BC. There's some records about it, and its popularity spread across the region, and it was widely traded across Asia, and in some places it was served as currency as well. And I think even the Romans, they took the pepper back to Rome, and they paid for it in gold. So then it started being called black gold. It kind of started having that nickname, and I think a lot of merchants kind of called it that. Mention tea. Some of you might be tea lovers, some of you might be coffee lovers, but I need to mention tea. So one of the major commodities exported from India to Britain was tea. Again, going back to the East India Company, they began commercial tea production in Assam in the 1820s. They made a lot of money from this. It was a growing industry, and by the 1900s, there was around 4,000 tea estates in North and South India, as well as there was 2,000 in Ceylon as well, which is now known as Sri Lanka. This popular drink, cup of tea, generated a really huge profitable industry, and a tea culture emerged in Britain, and things that were quintessentially English customs and rituals. So the afternoon tea, we all know and love, that kind of developed from there. It's interesting because when they pitched the adverts for it, they had this really attractive Indian tea picker who was having a cup of tea, and basically they romanticized the notion of these tea plants. And that's so far from the truth. They had long hours being in the hot sun, picking these tea leaves, and their wages were really poor. And yeah, they romanticized it, but the truth was something completely different. These tea pickers were basically, it was like a huge part of they were saying that they were almost treated as slaves, because if they didn't work in the field, they were either tormented or I think there was documentary series that they showed that how the plantation workers were actually treated really, and sometimes they wouldn't even get paid if they didn't pick it fast enough, and some of them had I think they lost the sensation in the tips of their fingers. And they were expected to just keep picking. And there was a lady that was like 91, and she was still picking in these fields. And they were just saying that it wasn't, it doesn't have a great history. But tea influenced Britain when it came to us. Can't not mention cricket. There might not be many of you that enjoy cricket. I do, so I'm mentioning it because I'm South Asian, and if you don't, you're kind of looked down upon, certainly within your family. So I had no choice but to enjoy it. But it is a quintessentially empire sport. It attracted many of India's royal elite and Indian university students in Britain. But even in India, they call it gully cricket, where children, they do anything that resembles a bat, they just get a tennis ball, tape it up with tape, and off you go. You just play. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are, anybody can play it. And it's captured the imagination of many people, and Bollywood have released lots of films on it as well, which kind of makes it even more interesting. Interestingly, when I was kind of looking at the history of this, was one of the most famous cricketers was somebody called K.S. Ranjit Singh. He was a prince of a state in India. He studied at Trinity College in Cambridge, and he started playing for Sussex in 1895, and he became team captain 4 years later. And he was the first Indian to play for England in 1896, and he was one of the most successful cricket players in history, really, which it fascinated me because I didn't know that there was anybody prior to the cohort we have now. The game of cricket spread to African and Asian countries with the rapid expansion of the British Empire. The first match in India was recorded in 1721, and that was a group of sailors wanted to play that. And now the revenue of cricket, and we have to mention this, is because this is where they get a lot of money. So cricketers are almost like they're better than celebrities or royalties in India, and they're some of the wealthiest members of Indian society. And actually they are revered, really. They've got like a godlike status, and I can't explain it. They've got something called the Indian Premier League, and we talk about the football here and how these footballers cost a lot of money. Well, basically India has a similar concept with the cricket, and they go for ridiculous amounts of money. Sometimes you just sit there thinking, that kind of money exists for one person? That can't even be right. So yeah, that's how big cricket is in the subcontinent. So it's loved. There's millions of supporters, and basically India and Pakistan are the leading cricketing rivals in the subcontinent. It says, I think it's probably the close one would be England and Australia for the Ashes, which is, you can liken it to that, but certainly a huge influence on the UK. So I'm just going to kind of move on again. I know we're going at rapid speed, but this is a really important quote, and I think it's quite powerful, really. So here you are, too foreign for home, too foreign for here, but never enough for both. And I think a lot of people and a lot of generations, or maybe certainly my generation, you feel that, when you go back to, wherever, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you're seen as too Western, too modern. Yet when you're here, you're not fully seen as British. And it's that, and I think sometimes that's a really difficult place to be, is where do you actually belong? You ask that question to yourself. What is your identity? Who are you? Are you British? Are you Pakistani? Are you British? Are you Indian? Are you British? Are you Bangladeshi? Or any other, your native country, as in where your parents came from, where your grandparents came from. And you think about migration and everything that happens. I mean, you think about what's happening in Afghanistan and those children and those families that are being torn from the country that they know, and then they're kind of being moved across the world. What would they ever be? Will they always be known as Afghanistani refugees? Will they always be refugees? Will they always be Afghanis? Will they ever kind of be seen as where they are, that is where their home is? Do they belong there? And I think this question is probably bigger for this presentation, but I think it's interesting to see what happens with the next generation, because here we are, we're talking about inclusivity and we're doing all these presentations and we talk about, well, do you know what, there's diversity and culture and we should learn about all of these things. But the truth is we're doing that now. Is that going to have an impact to the next generation, the generation after, or are 2-3 generations later, are they going to be still asking the question that I don't really belong, I still don't feel that I am home, and where is my home? The world is one world, but yet we've kind of sectioned it off that, nope, you're from here, that's where you belong and that's where you should be. But this quote always gets me, because I always think, actually, yeah, are you ever good enough for anywhere that you are? Just something to kind of think about, which kind of moves us on to the kind of next bit of the presentation. So just again, PTSD, intergenerational and historical trauma. So it's quite a big topic, this. And again, I feel like I'm not going to be going into it as much as I would have liked, but it's just to kind of give a sense about so colonialism we've talked about briefly, we've talked about partition, so countries being ripped apart, having a massive border between them put across, people having to move, and then people migrating from the land, the culture, the families they once knew to somewhere new to set up shop, set up home, set up a life. That can't leave you with just being as you are. It's going to leave its mark on you somewhere, and it's important to kind of recognize that. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but I think if I can, I'd really like to show you 2 videos, if that's okay. They are on YouTube, and a friend of mine was part of the interviewing team on this. So it was on BBC 2. It's called Partition and Me. India, Partition and Me. So if you could just bear with me, I'll just try and get it up. It was working before, and I'm really hoping it's going to work now. So if it doesn't, please tell me. Is that okay, Salome?
Yeah, that's fine. Just put some music on while you do that.
That works. That works. No. Okay. Thank you.
Don't worry. Just take your time. It's okay.
Okay, it should work. It's just that we know
yeah,
that
we can see your screen now. We can see your screen. Hopefully the sound comes through.
No?
No sound.
So this is what happened last time. Let's try again. Okay. You have to stop sharing and then go back into the include computer sound. I don't know why. Can't you just integrate it? It would make our life easier. Try again.
Year-old Hindu who was traveling in the opposite direction to his.
So I'll get started from the beginning. Is that okay?
That's great, thank you.
To meet an 82-year-old Hindu who was traveling in the opposite direction to his Muslim
Can you
grandfather.
expand the video so it fills the screen?
Young Chandpal was on a train with several thousand refugees making their way out of Pakistan when they were stopped near the town of Pakpatan.
तो रोक दिया तो वहाँ पे पहले मुसलमान तैयार खड़े थे। अच्छा। तो उन्होंने गाड़ी के ऊपर हमला कर दिया। हाँ, अटैक कर दिया। अटैक कर दिया तो उन्होंने जो पीछे 3 कंपार्टमेंट थे ना, वो सब साफ कर दिए।
They basically just cleaned out the back 3 carriages of they killed everybody. Yeah.
Last 3 compartment.
तो जब ये अटैक हो रहा था आपके फैमिली में किसी को?
हाँ, बस एक हमारे यहाँ वो लगी।
यहाँ।
तलवार लगी ना, वो कुल्हाड़ी।
जी।
वो यहाँ पे हमारी भाभी को लगी।
Were there any other injuries to your family?
No.
No. Okay. And you managed to escape, and then okay. So what happened next? उसके बाद क्या हुआ जब आप?
दिन के 12 बजे पहले ही होंगे। वो कसूर एक स्टेशन है।
अच्छा।
तो वहाँ से मुसलमान पहले तैयार खड़े थे।
ओह।
तो उन्होंने क्या किया, उस जंगल में से निकल गए, फायरिंग शुरू कर दी। मैंने आपको धक्का दिया, उसको धक्का दिया, आखिरकार
मैं समझ गया।
बहुत से लोग
जी।
और जो जवान थे वो कुचल गए, तो हमारी बहुतों की मौत तो वहीं हो गई।
People were dying just from being trampled.
लाश जो है भरी पड़ी हैं।
तो फिर क्या हुआ?
हमारे हिंदुस्तान की मिलिट्री आ गई, गाड़ी लेके, रेलगाड़ी।
जी।
तो अमृतसर में वहाँ सरदार लोग बड़े तैयार खड़े थे। उन्होंने कहा कि मुसलमानों ने, सरदारों ने कहा कि गाड़ी आ रही है अब मुसलमानों की।
अच्छा।
मुझे पता नहीं, लेकिन वहाँ उन्होंने खूब कत्लेआम किया
सबको। How do you, looking back and thinking about it now, how does all of that make you feel?
उसके लिए एक मैं आपको छोटी सी बात सुनाता हूँ
जी।
वो क्या है? दुख भरे दिन बीते रे भैया, अब सुख आयो रे, संग जीवन में नया लायो रे। हमारे दिल के दुख थे वो खत्म हो गए, अब हम खुश हैं।
That entire generation, they went through so much. You know, listening to all the horrible things that people went through, I feel so sorry for them because they're still living through it. I think it's so important that they tell their stories, because if anything like this happens again, we can't let it happen again. It was the end of the world for so many people. It was the end of the world. We can't let it happen again.
Go to the next one. Thanks.
Baji, you'll have tea, coffee. Icky cheese. Oh, that looks nice. It's dokra, but made small. Dokri.
I'm starting my journey close to home by visiting my mum and my aunties in West London. They were young girls in 1947 and rarely talk about how they survived partition. As Sikhs, they found themselves living in the new state of Pakistan, which was created as a homeland for India's Muslims. They were forced to flee to India when partition was announced.
What do you remember in 1947? What happened?
One day, Sikh military comes with green lorry, and they says, "Come on, everybody have to move from here. If you stay here, they will kill you." They put us in the lorry and take to the station.
So there was your mother,
Yeah.
there was you two, and another little sister, baby sister.
We stay in the train 3 nights. No food, nothing. My sister was a very bad. She's very bad. My sister died over there.
My family had lived in Jhelum and Rawalpindi for generations. When India was divided in two, they ended up on the wrong side of the border and were no longer welcome. That's why, along with millions of others, they were forced to flee.
I always thought that before these troubles and before partition, everybody used to get on. What was it like before partition with Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs?
They were friends, but just like brothers and sisters and everything.
So how did that feel, living there when you were all together?
Very nice, very just never thought that something will happen like this. We never thought. And from their side, up to now, I haven't been in Rawalpindi. And I miss that place very badly. Oh, very sad. It's very sad. The partition thing was very sad. It is written in the history that people write with the golden and silver words, but this history is written with the blood.
It's clear that the events of 1947 in India have affected my family till today. And I think it's fair to say that all of us who've been affected by partition still live under that shadow. I'd like to find out what happened to the world that my mum talked about, where everybody lived side by side as brother and sister.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing those.
Thank you. We'll talk a bit more about them at the end, because then that leads nicely into the next bit. Okay. Okay. Can you see that? Yeah, thank you. So then that kind of leads us on to talking a little bit about PTSD. I don't want to mention too much, but PTSD is defined by a number of adverse psychological impacts on a person's mental health, well-being, reliving experiences, avoidance, emotional numbing, and mental health problems, and the long-term repercussions on functioning. Children are vulnerable to PTSD too, and there's a lot of research out there. They can be affected more than adults, in particular influencing the way in which their development unfolds following trauma. You saw the video there. Those old ladies were children when they kind of went through this experience. Historical trauma experiences are also important because of their long-term impacts on a person's child rearing practices and socialization, and because living through the collective experience of trauma, it kind of creates these cultural narratives about identity and nationality as well, which is quite, I think, important when we kind of think about where do people belong. So that was one of the things I wanted to kind of mention here is just in terms of historical trauma is, you can kind of have a hostility towards groups that are identified as perpetrators, as a sense, and even conflict in the future might be seen as justified. So for a lot of people, Britain colonized India. Britain kind of created a lot of those difficulties, and there's a lot of people that do have that kind of thing, that the British were responsible for this. A lot of those people didn't come and live in Britain for that reason. They kind of migrated to Canada, and there's a lot of research around that as well, because they couldn't come here. But then even Canada is a Commonwealth country, so it's really interesting kind of just thinking about the cultural narratives around what trauma holds for people, which kind of then thinks about intergenerational trauma. And I wanted to mention this quickly as well, was because research and a lot of books were written about the first documented account of it was among the descendants of Holocaust survivors, where the impact was clearly passed on from one generation to the next, and it created this snowball effect of cumulative damage. Really, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, trauma affects people in the way people think and act, and actually overwhelms a person's ability to cope and engage with things that they should be. The events that were occurring in the period of the partition in 1947 are now over 74 years ago. Most of the adults who lived through this are actually no longer alive. There are a few members of the generation that were born in those years that are alive today, that are still sharing their stories. So thinking about a grandparent who's 84, just thinking about the stories that were happening for them, and things that were hidden and they weren't talked about. You were just expected to kind of, well, that's your lot, and that, you're just believing, trusting God, and you're kind of here now, and you just deal with the circumstances. So all the stuff that was coming through, that pain, the sadness, the loss, it was kind of almost not talked about. People living through its violence would have experienced many traumatic events, which is why I wanted to kind of bring, the concept of intergenerational historical trauma to the forefront, is thinking about witnessing killings, betrayals by next door neighbors. One minute you're friends, the next minute you're kind of calling out each other, and you're telling people that the Muslims live here, Hindus live here, Sikhs live here, like losing their homes, fleeing their homes under the threat of murder, scared of being raped, starvation, destitution. And thinking about, I think more recently, the idea of PTSD, we know more about this now than we ever did. The understanding of trauma in refugees is far more in our kind of mindset now when we have these conversations than it was all those years ago. So in 1947, nobody was really talking about trauma. Trauma it's a buzzword for now, and the reason it is because we're more aware of these things, these impacts that people have living through all of that. You kind of look at the definition and you think, gosh, people experience so much, and how did they kind of cope with that? And the truth is, I don't think they ever did. They learned to live through it and they managed, but the impacts was kind of seen through generations, and they still are being seen now, really. I've got this really good illustration. It's done by a really good therapist called Ayan Mukherjee. And he does a lot of drawings. He's a therapist and does a lot of cartoons and drawings. And he talks about epigenetics and the impact actually of how your great-great-grandparents can impact you really and your mental health. And one of the quotes he has is, when you work on your trauma, you choose to not pass it on to the next generation, which I think is quite powerful really, because there's a lot of onus on you to not be passing on those experiences to the next generation, because you do it in ways that you don't even know that you're doing it. And I think there's a lot of focus groups that have talked about this to generations, and just people kind of saying, actually, I didn't realize that my children kind of aware of this was happening for me. And just thinking about intergenerational trauma is, there's a lot of research now on the impacts of people living through the violence of partition and how it would have led to the severe trauma mental health. It's still very much stigmatized in South Asian communities, because people never thought to seek professional help over their traumatic experiences. And it kind of manifested in toxic ways that then obviously consequently has an effect on their children. And I think the added layer of extreme racism and poverty, and children growing up with the effects of that. There were some stories that were shared in a focus group that was one in Bradford, and there was these older, I think there was this lady that was 79, and she said her father was angry, irrational, and really turbulent, and his mood would just flip in seconds, and the whole family would just walk on eggshells. But they weren't really sure. They knew it was to do because he was sad, he'd left his home and half his family, and there was just a lot of impact of partition that happened. But he said that this was happening in most families, but it was just not talked about really. So stories within families of experiences of coming to Britain and their experience of integrating into a society that they didn't feel wanted them, that was just another layer on top of all of this. So you just think that it's just this constant, these events are happening one after another, layer upon layer upon layer. How can they not affect a person, you know? So it's just something to kind of mention there. So it then leads us on to just South Asian mental health in general, really, and just thinking about, you know, what that kind of means. So according to the Mental Health Foundation, Black and minority ethnic groups in the UK are generally more likely to be diagnosed with mental health problems, admitted to hospital, experience poor outcomes from treatment, disengaged from mainstream mental health services. But those are only the ones that are presenting to mental health services. Those are the only ones that are kind of, their heads are above the parapet, if you will. There's a lot of people that are not even kind of getting to that place in the first place. So the data is a bit skewed, and there is limited research. I think there's a lot more research being done more recently, and you will see a lot of papers that are coming out or are in press or being submitted. But up until now, the research has been quite poor, which misses a huge demographic of people. So the word mental, the literal meaning of the word mental is one of the things that many people have raised, and saying that a lot of immigrant and refugee families, they don't really discuss their mental health problems. It's really taboo. It's like a weird thing to do. You know, you wouldn't be saying, oh, you know, he's really depressed or he's anxious, because it was really an unusual kind of thing. And a lot of, if you think about the cultural perspective, that mental illness signifies being crazy or is mad, and it prevents families from seeking help because of the fear of bringing shame or embarrassment on the family. You know, I was spoken to, and I had no idea that a relative of mine had another daughter, which is weird. You know, everybody knows how many children there are in a family. Nope, they had 4 children, and that was as far as we were aware. Apparently, they had a daughter who, she had a lot of physical disabilities, but she also had mental health problems, psychosis. She would say that she was seeing jinns and whatnot. So every wedding, every kind of funeral, anything that happened, there was all these 4 children in tow, but there was this one child missing. But they decided they didn't want to share that with everyone. Only more recently, they started sharing the fact, yeah, we've got this other child. And even then, it's like they're embarrassed, and it's only kind of a chance that people kind of found out. So yeah, I think even now in this day and age, people are so embarrassed of having this and feel like shame has been brought on their family because people are a little bit mad, according to them. Studies also suggest that communities of colour and immigrant populations are more likely to display physical rather than psychological psychological symptoms in response to their mental health problems. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Culture-specific communications of distress. So the sinking heart syndrome. So this is really interesting. There was one study that was done many years ago, and since then there wasn't much research on this, but sinking heart often related to distress and anxiety, commonly reported, where people were feeling that their heart was sinking, but it was rarely picked up as a symptom of distress. But in Punjabi families especially, it was almost like, it's the translation is, if we say it, I mean, I speak Punjabi, but it's not my family's language that we speak. But one of the things is, mera dil baith raha hai. It basically means my heart is sinking. But everyone was like, it's just something that somebody says. But it was always related to anxiety. So when they did these kind of focus groups and things and saying, yeah, that's one of the cultural communications of distress. I know my mother's anxious when she says that. And I was thinking, actually, it's really interesting, those little things, those nuances that we just don't know. And they're kind of missed by GPs or anything. They were sending people off to cardiologists rather than to mental health professionals, because it was that lack of understanding, really. The heart came back fine. It wasn't the heart that was the issue, really. But yeah, I think there's some research being done, I think, again, in Yorkshire by somebody, can't think on the top of my head. So presentation of psychological symptoms are culturally grounded. Mental illness in one culture may not be viewed as such in another. And mental health is a Western concept. So when you do, it's kind of obviously becoming more mainstream and other people are talking about it. But we've got to remember the whole concept of mental health, it is a Western ideology, because people from minority and immigrant groups look at mental distress in a totally different way, in the way most majority white people do, or people from more developed countries do, because the concepts are different. And it's just having that framework in mind that not everyone's going to say, when you say, oh, we're going to refer you to a mental health service, they were like, what? We know kind of what it is, but we don't really have the concept of it. So there's a lot of explanation needed, really. And then again, thinking about migration and the pressure to acculturate to a new country, all these things, they have an impact on you on top of everything else that you've kind of had. So, one of the things I kind of want to point out is mental health is stigmatized, no matter what color you are, what race you are, what gender you are, what religion you are. Every mental health is a stigmatized illness. It is, even if you have difficulties or you're having a bad day and you need a mental health day, it's kind of looked down upon, really. It doesn't matter who you are. But then you kind of think about what else is there. It's that added layer, isn't it? When we think about the experiences people have, is why are people more susceptible to becoming mentally unwell, and what is it that they are experiencing, and what is the culture and the system around them impacting on their mental health. Just again, some prevalence. Again, the data is very skewed because you're not capturing the people that you really want to capture. But young people from BAME and migrant backgrounds are more likely to show developmental difficulties that are associated with psychosis, and there's more incidence of developing psychotic disorders later in life. There's a well-documented statistic that South Asian women are 2 or 3 times more likely to commit attempt suicide and self-harm in comparison to their white counterparts. I think also Indian Hindu women are also a similar kind of there as well. So they kind of did 3 groups. I think they did Pakistani Muslim, and they did Indian Hindu women, and then they did white. I think I'm sure that it was just a white cohort, and they were comparing them, and they found that I think the Pakistani Muslim group were higher in terms of their incidence of suicidality. Eating disorders is another one. Again, really interesting that bulimic symptomology was found higher to be in South Asians, regardless of gender, compared to other groups as well. And there was, again, this is the one that's linked before, is large-scale studies have found Pakistani Muslims to be particularly vulnerable to depression and anxiety. Again, stress, incorporating all the stuff that you're kind of going through, which we'd kind of mentioned before. Major affective disorder, notably depression, common within South Asians. Somatization, so the sinking heart syndrome would kind of come under somatization. So if you kind of think, it's mental health issues commonly interpreted their symptoms as physical illness, and often they don't want to seek psychological help because it's less embarrassing, really, to kind of go in, rather going with a broken leg or anything else to do with what's happening inside. Against suicide and self-harm. Psychosis and schizophrenia, I did want to mention this. So there's more recent studies, and they compared within the British population, and they found that the Pakistani population had a significantly higher risk of first episode psychosis. And I just wanted to mention The Boy in the Top Knot. I don't know if anybody's seen it or watched it, but it's brilliant. The book was fantastic, and it was about Satnam Sanghera, and it was his memoir really, and they did an adaptation on, I think, BBC One last year or the year before. And the main storyline is how Satnam didn't know that his father had schizophrenia until he was well into adulthood, I think, you know, grown man, and even then it was only because he'd gone to visit his parents for a weekend, and basically he found his father's medication, and he found out that his father had schizophrenia, and how his mother and his family had kind of hidden that. So for many years, nobody even knew. They knew the dad was a little bit different and quieter, but yeah, they didn't know. So The Boy in the Top Knot, I would recommend that as a watch or a read, because it's really interesting about mental health within South Asian communities. Culture of shame, too familiar. It's all too familiar in many South Asians, suffering in silence because they'd rather not share their problems. It's stigmatized. You know, the impact of cultural norms as well, thinking about the values placed on strong family relations and networks. And sometimes that can be at loggerheads with mental health services as well. And again, many people of South Asian backgrounds attribute mental illness to supernatural causes. You know, we think about demonic possession, black magic, evil eye. That is the model of reference. And for somebody that's coming in to service, when you've kind of always gone to imams or you've gone to places to kind of seek that support, all of a sudden somebody's saying, well, you need to be medicated, I need psychological therapy, they're going to just look at you like you might as well be speaking a completely different language to them. And I think that that's the difficulty as well. And I don't think I've got time today to talk about cases that I've got where it is that kind of balance of we look at people's religion and spirituality, but encompass that into the model of care that we give somebody. So when people and families are opposed for medication and psychological therapy, well, how do we kind of get people on board? And it is understanding the frame of reference they have and involving the imams and involving, you know, whichever religion or wherever belief system they have, involving that and kind of having that part of our formulation when we're working with patients really, really helps, really. So just a couple of slides on breaking down barriers. We kind of know this, it's not rocket science, but thinking about language and cultural barriers, it's a recurrent theme because some South Asians have commented that they don't feel heard by mental health professionals, and whether they understand the language or not, it feels like sometimes people are being dismissed because they've got bring all this other stuff. And I can understand services are struggling with resources. We can't have a South Asian or any other minority group, a psychologist, doctor, nurse available. So what do services need to do? We do need to be a bit more novel in our approach. How do we allow ourselves to give that space to somebody to feel heard, and be able to kind of explore their mental health? And I think, again, language is a whole different topic, but language is such a powerful tool, and it's kind of understanding the nuances within language itself about what is said, how translators are kind of involved and all that kind of stuff, because that is a huge barrier. And research suggests that the first instance, South Asian referrals from GPs to secondary care services are really scarce, actually, because sometimes GPs fail to recognise culture-specific symptoms of distress. Again, the sinking heart syndrome is just one thing. You know, that presentation is one, but it's understanding people. I mean, they have 10 minutes sometimes to kind of review people, and it's not easy, it's hard, you know, and it's kind of, unless that is something that you're very aware of or is in your awareness, you're not going to be making referrals out. I think we're getting better at it though, you know, we're far from perfect, but we're getting there. Again, dropping out of services because they believe that providers have a fixed view about Asian communities, and they offer simplistic yet unrealistic solutions. So what works for one group of people may not work for another, and it's kind of thinking, well, what can we do and be a bit more creative in kind of helping with what we have, because resources are tight everywhere. Post-COVID, we're all struggling, and I think it's just thinking about, well, actually we have this demographic of service users, people that want to use our or need to use our services. How do we kind of make sure within our resources we kind of are catering for that? So again, holistic person-centered approaches, it's easy to say, but it's not always done. And it's kind of thinking, well, what is that? What is a person-centered approach? I've got 50 people to see. How do I kind of, you know, yeah, it's thinking about what you can do. Educating yourself. So this session today was, even though it's a whirlwind tour, I know that, but at least it's kind of a place where you're kind of listening to another perspective, really. And next time we'll listen to another perspective, but educating yourself, educating people, clients, patients, service users about, you know, mental health services, and about we're trying to kind of understand where you're kind of come from. The spiritual models of help seeking are really important to kind of understand where people are kind of coming from, really. Working with imams, priests, familiarize ourselves with religiosity as well. I work very closely with the imam at Ashworth. He's fantastic, and we've also got a chaplain who is also brilliant. But it's kind of just seeing how that works within the framework that we're working in. And then tailored psychoeducational interventions. And the whole point is to help service users to understand their mental health. And South Asians in particular, it is something that they, at the first go, they probably won't. But the thing is, it's kind of taking it to them in a more palatable way. And you can have easy read forms, and you can have these jazzy little handouts and things. It's not about that. It's about sitting and having conversations and breaking down barriers for people in ways that are going to be helpful. And we don't have all the answers, and it's just kind of thinking outside the box sometimes and incorporate that into sessions. Okay, and breathe. So just before we kind of finish, because I know there's a lot of things in there, I just want everyone to just take a deep breath, just look around, notice what things are around you, fix yourself on something. I mean, I'm just looking at a very cold cup of tea, which is in a pink mug, but just notice things around you. And then, yeah, thank you for listening. I know that's a lot of information. I'm fully aware, so I apologize if that was way too much for people, but there's a lot of documentaries, there's books, there's YouTube videos, there's podcasts. It's all out there. We've got, you know, so much information, but if you want to know more, please go there. And if anybody, like I said, is affected by this, if you want to have a chat afterwards, we can kind of facilitate that. But I'm looking forward now to speaking, listening to rather, our next person. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha. That was brilliant. That was amazing. You really did a good job. And even though it was a whistle-stop tour, you really gave us, it's like chock-packed. It's like one of those little the vitamin drinks. You have that and you get everything in it. So thank you so much for educating us, because a lot of us just knew a little bit. And what we're going to do then is let Yuvaraj just tell us his story, and then we can have like a chance to have a discussion and have questions and interact. And with Yuvaraj, you can interact with Yuvaraj as well, because I think sometimes he might say something and you want to ask him, well, what do you mean by that? So you can interact with, is that okay, Yuvaraj, if people interact with you as well?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Thanks, Salome, and thank you, Aisha, for such a wonderful presentation. You covered most of the aspect I was going to say, so I think my presentation will be very simple and quick one. So let me share the screen. I don't know whether it'll allow me to do that. Is it coming through?
Yeah, something is coming through right now. Yep, we can see, yeah, journey through clouds.
How do I go for a full screen? Any idea? Anyone?
Aisha, do you want to help Yuvaraj, because you just did a presentation? Unmute yourself, sorry.
Sorry, Yuvraj. So if you go to share content and then presenter mode, the content only, and then the windows, just pick one. But have you opened it up? Because I had to open mine up as a presentation and put it in slide form.
Oh,
yeah, this is already open in slide form. It's quite visible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Open
keep
it.
Simple.
Okay. So you're on slide 2 right now. That's what we can see.
You see the blue one?
Yeah, we can see slide 2. I think.
Oh, Salome, would you mind sharing the slides that I sent you?
Okay, I'll have a go. Okay.
This is slide 1 I can see. Slide 1 of 12.
Okay, stop sharing then, and I will try to see. And then you just tell me when to.
I don't know how to stop sharing.
If you go back to the top again, you can. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Now it's my turn to mess this up. Then heck. I should have put on some Bhangra music to make this go well. How can I see what I'm trying to do here? I think my screen is frozen. Oh my days. Yeah, it's frozen.
Do you want me to put it up? Have I got it?
I think, yeah, the best thing is to send
Am I
it to.
frozen? I'm frozen, aren't I?
Yeah, it's not moving right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, if you want to send it, I can put it up, and then if you want me to change it, as in the.
Yeah, you should got it now, Aisha.
Okay, Bob. Don't we just love technology? All right, got it. 1 second.
Sorry, but a bad workman always blames his tools.
It's true. Okay, got it. 1 sec. Let's get this up.
It's only a computer. You're much smarter than it is, you know.
Well, I have it open, so if you can give me 1 second, we will get that running.
I think if you're on an Apple device, it might be more difficult to manipulate things. Not really designed for Apple to work well.
So I was totally thrown off. I'm sorry. I think it's internet issues.
Okay, right, we should have it now in a journey. Okay, can you see anything now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll just put it into.
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks for your patience. So this is about my true story when I came to UK first time. So I'm a first immigrant, and I certainly come to UK, as Salome put the questions before, to have a fish and chips in Blackpool. No, it is not. It is not. So I came to UK for many reasons. I had a dream. So next slide, please. So I had a dream. So I was chasing my dream. When I was young, my mom was suffering from osteoarthritis for a long time. Maybe I can't even recollect when she started having problems because I was so young. So from my young age, she was having problems with her knee joint, legs kind of bended. And in India, the treatment is very expensive. So my dream was to help her to have a right treatment. So I need to make money. And also, that was one of my dreams, to kind of make money to fix her legs and to make money to build a hospital like for similar people like my mom who's suffering from osteoarthritis, so they can come in who can't afford for the treatment, so they can have a free treatment. That's my second dream. And my third dream is, I had quite a lot of dream anyway. So my third dream is to, when I was working in mental health, as Aisha said, the mental health awareness is not there much. So what people do there is, if anyone in the family got mental ill, they tend to take to the sacred places like temples or mosque and leave people there and come over. So that's then the people who have a mental illness, they end up in streets and they find it very, very difficult. So I worked for an organization who rescue those people, but obviously it's kind of a charity. We need lots of works to do. So these were my dreams. So I was thinking how I can make money to bring my dreams true. So the only way I could see is to move on to a country where I could work hard and get some money and go back and, make my dream come true. So I was chasing my dream. So apparently I put this background picture because this always remember me, my first flight that I took to India. I never been in a flight before. And so the flight was a transit flight. So it came to Dubai first and from Dubai to Manchester. So I was really excited to be in the first plane. Because I never been in the plane before, and all those kind of things that were really good and going on so well. So I've been recruited from India from a private hospital, not from Mercy Care, in a private hospital based in Bury, Greater Manchester. So they came to India and they recruited me along with the other few nurses. At that time, and basically my background is occupational therapy. At that time, there was a huge vacancy for occupational therapists. So there was in a home office wanted list for people to come over and work for NHS and also for private organizations. So I got being recruited from India. So before the recruitment, there were lots of agencies. They were asking like £5,000 to come over to the UK, which I didn't have that money to afford. But this company who recruited me, they said, we reclaim the money from the hospital they are recruiting me. So they sent me flight tickets and everything. That was absolutely fantastic. So although I have to pay for the visa and the work permit and all sort of thing. But anyway, I got a flight ticket. I boarded the plane. First plane was absolutely brilliant. And the second plane, when I had a transit, it was really shocking because I was the only person at that time in the plane with a different skin color. The rest of them were like really white, and that's where my anxiety was all kicked in. And it was my mind before coming to UK it's like the Britain, something looked like a Victorian age, and how the people are dressed and how the people behave and all sort of thing. They had a pre-concept of how UK looked like. So obviously it was a big shock in the plane. Then I never seen, to be honest with you, may not seen knife and fork before. So I was like conscious sitting in the plane and, having the food. I always used to finger food and all sort of things. So it was like really difficult experience to have food and not spill over and what people will be watching and all sort of thing. So finally, somehow managed to arrive in Manchester. So I was being told that there will be someone to pick me up and they're going to take me to the accommodation. So there's a lovely girl from the hospital, from the HR, and I arrived on Friday evening around 8 o'clock in Manchester. She came to the airport. She was holding my name. And I have absolutely no clue, how the place looked like and how she looked like and who will be coming to pick me up in the airport. Obviously, none of my family members, immediate family members, have never been to abroad. So it was all new experience. And at that time, I was in early 20s. So young man, we didn't have of all the technology facilities that now we have to explore. How the UK looks and all the maps and where you're going and all sort of things. So it was like really new, strange experience, like, like a blind, you're going somewhere new, new country, new place, new people and all whatsoever you can imagine. So absolutely all new. So I could see the name of the airport. She was holding the big banner of my name. Obviously my name is like a strange name, so I could easily able to pick that up. And she took me, next slide please. So she took me on the way. She said, would you like to eat something? Obviously, as Aisha said before, the communication was a big issue. because first in the country, first time speaking to someone from a foreign country. I've struggled with accent, her accent and my accent and all sort of thing. So she said, "Do you like to eat something?" And that's what I got. And I'm like really hungry because I was very conscious in the plane, not eating or not spilling and, all sort of thing. And the food was absolutely different of what I've been used to. So I was desperate for food. And I said, "Yes, I'm really hungry and I need to eat something." So she took me to a corner shop, which looks exactly something on the picture that you could imagine. And she said, "I'll wait in the car. You go to the corner shop, get something, come back, and I'll take you to the flat." So I went into the corner shop. It was, again, all new experience, totally different from what I used to back in India. So I went into the corner shop, not seen the sandwich before or anything like that. So I don't know what to buy to eat, what's available to buy and eat. But one thing which I found is the bread. My mother used to give me a bread when I was sick. So bread was the only thing, I found it really interesting for me. And also she gives me a milk every night when I go to the bed. So I picked bread and milk. And that's all I could see that could be eaten. So I took them and I came back and she took me to the flat. And it was a 2-bedroom flat. Next slide, please. So it was a 2-bedroom flat. And one was occupied by a nurse. And again, he's an immigrant who came before me. And he was working as a nurse. And at that time, he was mostly working in nights. And she said, you're another flatmate. He would kind of guide you through because he's here before approximately about 6 months and he knows this area, and whatever you need, just ask him. And I'll come back on Monday and I pick you to the hospital so where you can start your duty. And I said, okay, that's fine. So at that night, on the Friday night, when I reached the flat, maybe around 10 o'clock, I never seen this guy. He's already gone to work. So I have a bread in my hand and I have a milk in the other hand. And I'm not used to those kind of the cookers that we've seen here now. So it's all strange experience. Managed that night and I was waiting for him to come back next day morning. It's all new place, new bed, new places, all sort of thing. Didn't sleep much. And he arrived the next day morning. He arrived and he went straight to bed. He said, "I've been on the nights and I see you late." "Oh, welcome, new guy. HR told me this will be a new guy coming from India." And that's all. He probably had a conversation. And again, the communication, the accent, the English and all sort of thing is a bit of a challenging, because what I'm saying, I don't know whether he was able to pick it up or what he's saying, I was able to understand. So it's all like, 1-minute conversation ended. He went to bed. Then I was sitting there. There's no phone for me to contact back home, India, saying that I arrived safely. At that time, I was like about newly married, about 3 months that I got married. So my wife was desperately waiting for a phone call saying that I safely landed. Around that time when I kind of left India, there was like lots of stories where people being recruited abroad, they got lump sum money from the employers or from the people who actually got the job, and they take to another airport and left them there, and they get stranded and lost and all sort of things. So my wife was like literally worried, and even I was so anxious about whether I'll be end up like that. Anyway, I have nothing else to eat. I haven't seen cereal before in my life. There's no phone that I could contact my family or ring them saying I'm safely landed. So it was 24 hours, that since I boarded the plane. I was like, I only knew, or I was only used to that, there's something like an open plan kitchen and a dining area and the bedroom. So Then I slowly started to think about what happens if I leave the flat and find the phone. First thing is I need to contact my family and I need to inform them that I've safely landed. The second thing is I'm hungry, I'm desperate for food. So I came down and I've looked right and left and it's all looks same. And all I could remember is about the flat number. And I don't want to leave further. Probably might walk to the end of the street. And again, all the streets look same. And, you know, I was like so scared. One, being new in a foreign country. And second thing is getting lost. And third thing is I don't have any phone or anything like that. And at that time, the smartphone wasn't that popular. The technology was just kind of coming up. We used to have the old style, the Nokia phone, which I brought over from India. And I don't know where to get the SIM card, you know, all those things. But one lucky thing I had is I had a big packet of bread and big packet of a big can of milk as well, like 2 liters of milk. So that was kind of a lifesaver of that time. So I went back in and I was waiting for this guy to wake up and, you know, give me some sort of a guidance. So he got up around 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon and he was busy over the phone. He was speaking to, you know, maybe his family or maybe his girlfriend. He was on the phone. And while he was on the phone, he was also cooking. And he said hello to me and that's it again. Then he went, he had a shower and he left to work. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, I need to speak to him. First, have that initial confidence to speak to him and understand what he's saying and put my request, what I need. So he left work and again, I was like left with that, you know, open plan kitchen dining area and the bedroom. And I was, don't know what to do, feeling really anxious, worried, wondering, you know, what's going to, how I'm going to contact my family and just waiting for the time so that again, Sunday morning, come back, at least try to catch him and, you know, have a little bit of a conversation, ask for some help. Next slide, please. So by the time the Sunday comes, he came back again, said hello, went to bed. That's all he did to me. And he was saying, I got a Sunday night shift. I need to go sleep and I'll catch you later. I'm like, oh, this is not getting anywhere. So then I gathered all my bravery and decided to work further, which I practiced the day before. And I took a pen and a paper, start writing the road names, start writing the numbers, start, you know, making note of the landmark. And I walked maybe a couple of streets furthermore and looking for, when I left India, the contact that you can do is you can have like browsing centers where you can go and email, or then you have like a telephone booth where you can make international calls and local calls. So I was in that mindset. So look for the browsing center or look for like a telephone booth where I could make an international call. So finally, I managed to find a telephone booth, but again, you know, I don't know how to use it, and I'm not used to, you know, the British money, the pounds, and all sort of thing. I still had an Indian money at that time, and I also brought in some more money with me, the British pounds. Where to put money? I was looking for any help, support, and in the streets in Bury, it was like suburb of Bury in Greater Manchester. You can't hardly see any soul walking past. So went in, came out, went in, came out a few times, tried all sort of thing, nothing worked. Then I slowly started to walk back and I was waiting for that man to, you know, wake up and give me a shout. But anyway, he got up as usual, busy in the phone, cooked something and he left to work. So I was actually waiting for Monday morning for the HR person to come and pick me up back to the hospital so I can say, this is what I want. At the same time, I couldn't find any other shops other than the corner shop. So I brought again a can of milk and the bread. So 2 days literally living with that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. From basically from Friday night. And I didn't eat properly in the flight as well. So I was desperately hungry for food, and I probably got enough of bread. And, I don't want to see bread in my life. I don't want to see milk in my life. I had enough of bread and milk. So, but I have no choice. I have to, feed me something. And the loneliness, there's no television or anything like that to keep my mind occupied. I don't know what to do. I was just kind of sitting there and looking at the clock, waiting for the time to pass, waiting for the time to come back on Monday. So 2 days and, well, basically 3 nights and 2 days. Next slide, please. So I was counting every second in the clock. Didn't sleep properly because new environment, new place, and in India there's always busy sound, busy people around, and you can't hear any clock ticking or anything like that I used to come from India. But here I can see there's a big clock in my room next to where I had my bedroom. So I was just counting the seconds. Didn't sleep properly, as I said, just kind of passing the time, waiting for the Monday. So that I can get some sort of idea where I am, what I'm doing, and what I used to. Next slide, please. So the biggest companion at that time was the clock. So 2 days and 3 nights, I was actually sitting like this and counting the clock. I was scared. I was scared of being lost. I was scared that whether this HR person will come back on Monday. Will I able to see my family again? Will I able to contact them? And insecure feeling of who's going to come into the flat, whether there's a safe. I'm not seeing any other similar colored people. All I've seen is strangers. I don't know anyone. And also when you have lots of time to on your own without phone or anything, or without internet, or whether you're occupied, you get lots of negative thoughts, isn't it? So that's what the thoughts and everything. And homesickness. I was missing my mom, my family, my sisters that I left back, and the food, basically, all this kind of things was like really, really, concern for me. And I was like, I want to go back. I had enough of this. I didn't expect this to happen. Just only 2 days, within that time, with your hungerness, with the sense of loneliness, nobody to talk, all those kind of things of like feeling really down. I want to go back, but how can I go back? How do I go to the airport? How do I book a plane? And all sort of those negative, feelings was really strong. And I was blaming myself. Why did I put myself into this? Why I need to go through all those things? And very, very worried about my safety and all sort of things. Next slide, please. So at that time, only thing I had is my hope. My belief of strong Christianity. I spend most of the time in prayers, apart from looking at the clock. So I'm waiting for Monday morning, having hope that I could contact my family, request them to help me out to make a phone call, or maybe get a SIM card for my phone, or all sort of thing. I didn't even know at that point I need to dial with the international codes. All simple things in life. Those times, because I'm the first migrant, and as I said before, there's none of my family, or I haven't heard anyone saying this is how foreign national looks like. This is how you used to do this, because none of the family had a foreign holiday as well. So it's all very, very new experience, and I feel like I'm a child starting a new life. learn to walk and learn to crawl and all sort of things in the life. So the faith was the biggest thing. Praying, and luckily I brought the Bible, so I was able to read the Bible and try to be strong. And I was thinking about the reason I came, and I was thinking about, you know, I need to help my mom. I need to earn money to help her to have the right treatment. So because she'd been suffering for a while. So I was kind of reminding myself, so it's only 2 days, it's only 3 nights, you know, you should be able to find myself in a better place, try to be positive as much as I can. And was thinking how people feel in a similar situations and how they have gone through. Obviously, everybody's experience are different. But for myself, without knowing anyone, no contact, no family members, nothing to occupy my mind except reading Bible and the big companion of the clock. And, you know, I was trying to remain as much as positive, waiting for the very, very moment of Monday. Next slide, please. So, obviously, I was living with the bread and milk, and not only past Monday, but also the rest of the week, because I was initially shy to ask people. The communication was a major issue at that time again. I was thinking I should be knowing this. You know, I'm a grown-up adult. I should be able to look after myself. Obviously, the eating, the aspect, how could you go and ask your employer about, can you help me to buy things? But without even, you know, realizing this is the need, I was thinking I should be aware of this, even though it's a new country. I should be able to look after myself. I should be able to deal with these things. But with our culture, men are never used to cooking, even though if you have the right resources. So, like for example, if I enter the kitchen, my mom say, "What are you doing in the kitchen? You know, get out." Even if I wanted a glass of water. So that was my culture. So I have no idea about cooking, and also the other thing is no idea about you know, where to get ingredients and, you know, what I need, all sort of thing. So the biggest lifesaver at that time was, again, bread and milk. So I know the shop which is nearer to the flat that I was living. I know I can get the milk and the bread. So for a week, I was living in only bread and milk for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So then there's a help come through. Next slide, please. There's as we say, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So in the meantime, on Monday, when the HR people picked me, they said, the first thing they said to me is, your wife left so many messages on our answering phone over the weekend. She's desperately trying to get in touch with you, and she wanted to know the safety. And they helped me to ring my home. And when I rang and when I say hello to my wife broken out and saying, just kind of worried, we thought you're lost. And, you know, it took a while for me to console. But I can see the people around the HR office were looking at me, and, you know, I'm a bit of shy to express myself fully, to reassure her, and all sort of things you could imagine. But anyway, I had a phone call. So and I explained to her, this is what I've gone through. I was living only with the bread and milk, and I'm really hungry. That's only Monday morning. And she said she will try to find someone who already been in the country and try to help me, or come and pick me up and try to teach me the local things where to get. So that was kind of a bit of a light for me. So over the week time, she managed to find one of her mates who have immigrated just 6 months ago. So her friend said that she's going to come and see me on Friday, because she's working through the week and Friday, and pick me up and try and show the local areas, get the SIM card, try to show me simple recipes that I could cook and all sort of thing. So I was waiting for the Friday, the following Friday, that she came back, and she came and she took me, and she kind of gone through the basics and, you know, all sort of things, even including usage of toilets. You know, we never used to the toilet tissues, but, you know, we used to the water, all sort of simple life basic thing. And she also teach me about the, you know, the pounds and the, you know, the pennies, and because I have no idea about the pennies when I arrived, how much it worth and what I could get for it, and where is local the shops where I can go and buy ingredients. So that was a bit of life-changing moment. So next slide, please. So in summary, before I started to come to this country, I was really excited because I thought I'm going to get some money, earn some money, and going to come back and chase my dream, and able to support my mom, pay for her surgery. About the future aspect, the early days, and also the few, and after that I've gone through, because the more than I earn, I paid on the visas, the passport, and all sort of thing. Probably till now, I would have spent £20,000 on those, you know, visas and passport and all sort of thing. And also the striking question that Aisha was going through in her presentation, she mentioned about where do people like us, or maybe me, fit in, because the visa to stay in this country, which is required for me to work, is costing more. So I have to give up my nationality. So to get the British passport, which I have done because the visa is costing more. And for some odd reason, I was not able to go back. I've tried to go back, but some of my friends have gone back. I've tried to go back, but it did not happen. Well, 5 years ago, I tried to go back, but I have to come back. So, and the other thing is, when I go back, so it's like more than 20 years now I'm in this country. So it's more than half of my life in this country. So when I go back, I struggle to fit in there, because people think that, you know, I've been out of the country for such a long time, including in government, like if you're applying for any certificates or, you know, simple things, you're applying for some, because we don't have proof of evidence that you lived there, like council tax or even open a bank account and all complicated type of things. And even people think that you don't contribute anymore to this country. You're earning somewhere, you're paying tax there, but you have not contributed to this country of whatsoever. And also, before I moved over here, as an Asian family, we have lots of family gatherings, family festivals, all sort of things for Diwali or any functions, you name it. There are loads of family togetherness. But being moved over for such a long time, it's really difficult that they don't kind of see me as a part of their family. They see me as like a foreign national. Oh, he comes in once a year and he says hello and he goes back. And like weddings or any kind of big festivals, they're not even kind of informing us or telling us before where the family, which is very, very important thing. For example, there's a wedding in my family next week. Unfortunately, I was not able to make it, but it's really make me wonder, where do I fit? Do I fit in here, or do I fit back in country? But, you know, all sort of things. And out of 3 dreams, you know, I managed to successfully accomplish 1 dream, and I'm still chasing, you know, 2 other dreams. And I'm hopeful that in future, or maybe in long future, I could be able to kind of fulfill those dreams of setting back and of building an hospital. Like Aisha shared, the cricket is a big thing, and the one of my inspiration is the cricketer Imran Khan, some of you may be aware, he set up a hospital for his mom who been diagnosed with the cancer. Obviously, her mom passed away now, but he's doing a charity through the hospital. So he was my inspiration at that time to kind of build a similar hospital so that they get a free treatment, free healthcare, people who have been affected with, osteoarthritis and things like that. And also, the experience I've seen working in mental health, the people are not getting right treatment because it's cost quite a lot. So they're being left in the mosque or in the spiritual places where they end up in the street. So I'm still chasing my dreams. So that's my journey continue. Next slide, please. So thank you for listening to my stories. And it's a personal stories. I still remember some of the times that I've gone through, especially the early days, the journey. And I think that now when I speak to the new immigrants, if people ask me, is it worth coming to UK? And I would say no, I kind of discourage, not because of my personal experience, but the things that they have to pay for visas and the passports, and when they wanted to go back and the challenges of that I face, and I completely don't discourage, and I've just kind of share some of my experiences so that they are, because nobody have told me or supported me in my initial days of life. But the one of the worst psychologically affecting factor is that sometimes when you come across the racist comments, or sometimes even patients says, oh, you Indians, we don't want to take any treatment from the Asian people or from other people, so we have gone through so much, or we have kind of given up so much in our life. We come here and working hard, and we don't claim any benefits, or even when before I came to here, I didn't even know there's a benefits. Such things can kind of exist. We even now don't claim any benefit even after such a long time. So we're not coming here for the money. We're just coming here to fulfill our dream, chase our dream. Everybody have their own dreams, and they've been chasing throughout their lifetime, I guess. I think when I was recently had an opportunity to participate in international recruitment, I think my experience kind of helping them to kind of settle them quickly and feel them more valued and feel them supported. Most importantly, the pastoral care, which is very, very key aspect, as Aisha mentioned, lots of children, the families being left, their children back home, wives like myself, newly married. My mom recently been sick. I'm very, very close to my mom. Unfortunately, I was not able to see her for the last 3 years now. That is really kind of, really worrying me. She became really sick at that time. Recently, at some point, we thought we were going to miss her, but she managed to pull out. So those times that you really want to be with your close families to support them, I've heard one of the new cohort nurses who came over here, both her mom and dad being affected by COVID, and they've been admitted in the hospital. She couldn't even able to contact them through the phone, and she has to go. She's working in the ward, and she was not able to concentrate thinking about their loved ones. So things like that, how we can support them, and how can, and also for the generation. So when my children ask me, Dad, are you Indian or are you British? And I honestly say I have no answer. I don't know where do I fit in. I'm born in India, I brought up in India, I studied in India. Now I'm living more than half of my age here. So how do I say I'm British? Or how do I say Indian? Those kind of things kind of still hanging in your mind. Even though you try to be part of this culture, try to understand, try to work in this culture, mingle with the people, and all sort of thing, but you still feel that, oh, this may not fit in my culture. I still eat my food in my hand. I still enjoy that, rather than using knife and fork. I can eat now, but I still enjoy the curry, big flavor curry. But I need to be mindful in work. People do not like the smell of the curry. Some people are, made comments in the past, oh, you curry eaters, those kind of things. So it's kind of leaves some sort of a stress, anxiety, and worry. But the challenge is to be brave and sail through and chase the dream and focus and try to support the people who are going through similar kind of a journey. So that's it. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you so much, Yuvraj. That was heartbreaking. It really was heartbreaking. But